こんにちは。今日私神学部の富田と申します。で今日ですねイスラムと科学という、テーマなんですけど、従来あんまりこういうテーマイスラムと科学というちょっと色合い今まで我々この新教がですね提供してきたテーマからすれば少し色合いが違うかなという感じでございます。ただこれ深く考えてこのテーマをつけたわけではございませんで、何ですかね、もうかなり事務的に便宜的に、つけましてで、ですねものでございますけれども、しかしその後ですねいろいろ考えておりますと、これなかなか悪くないテーマであるなというかですね、今日基本的にですね我々の時代というのは科学の時代、この創世紀科学の時代でございましてですね、その科学というものを別の視点からその科学というものにどっぷり我々使っているんでございますけど、そういう時代にいるわけでございますけれども、それをまた別の視点からこう考えてみるというのもいい機会であるなと、そういうふうに考えている次第でございます。で今日はですねよく中東イスラム世界に2つの大きな文化的センターがあるというふうに耳にします。一つはですねエジプトであります。で一つはイランでございます。この2つがですねその中東における二大文化センターであると、中心地であると、こういうふうによく耳にします。でその2つからですねそれぞれ一人の専門家の方を新進気鋭の学者の方々をお呼びできます。そういうことでですね今日はもうそういう形で我々のですね我々が立っているその今日の時代における基本的なシンボル的な価値観について、あるいはシンボルについてですね別の視点から新たな視点から考える、そういう機会をほんのわずかなスピーチかとは思いますけれども、我々はその機会を使ってそういうものを手にすることができれば、掴むことができればと、そのように考えている次第でございます。ということで、続きましてですね、このセンター長、ここのシスムのセンター長をやっている、務めております小原教授の方から挨拶の言葉、それから紹介がございます。
本日はお越しくださいましてありがとうございます。新教学際研究センター長の小原です。今日司会進行を務めさせていただきますけれども、簡単に講師の紹介と本日の全体の流れについて最初に説明をさせていただきます。でまず忘れないうちにちょっと一つお願いしたいことがあるんですけれども、皆さんがですね、受付のところでお取りいただいたプログラムの中に質問票が本日挟まれていたと思います。お二人これからお話ししていただきますけれども、お二人のお話を聞く中でご質問したいことがありましたら、その質問票の方にご記入をください。そしてお二人の講演が終わった後で一新教学際研究センターのスタッフの者が回収に当たりますので、ご記入いただいた方はその際にですね提出していただければと思います。集めたものからですねできるだけ多くのご質問を受け止めて、最後の質疑応答のところで講師の方々にお答えいただきたいと考えています。本日お二人の講師の方を海外からお招きいたしました。お一人はエジプトからですけども、サラーハ・オスマン先生、そしてもう一人イランからモジュターバ・ザルバーニ先生です。でまずですね、ザルバーニ先生にお話をいただき、それに続いてオスマン先生にお話をいただくんですけれども、 イスラム世界といいましても非常に幅が広いといいますか多様性がございますが、私たちがですねまずその思いつくのはイスラム世界にはですねスンナ派の伝統、それからシーア派の伝統があるということを皆様も聞いたことがあるかと思います。でその意味ではスンナ派を背景としたですね学者でありますオスマン先生、エジプトからですねで今ご研究ですけども科学とイスラムの関係についてお話をいただきます。またイランで研究を続けておられるザルバーニ先生にはやはりその伝統にですね即した形でイスラムと科学の関係についてお話をいただくことになります。簡単にお二人について紹介をしたいんですけども、まずザルバーニ先生です。ザルバーニ先生は現在イランにありますテヘラン大学神学部の准教授であります。ザルバーニ先生はその略歴のところにも書かれていますようにイスラームの神秘主義思想を中心としながらそれと他の宗教との関係についてのご関心をこれまでも持ってこられました。実は2007年にザルバーニ先生は京都に滞在されて京都を中心にですね日本の思想や宗教とイスラムとの関係についてのですねご研究も深められました。今回ですから2度目の来日になりますけれどもイスラムのですね神学を中心にしながら非常に幅広い関心をお持ちの方でそういった視点からですね今日は科学イスラムの視点からですね科学がどう見られるのかということについてもお話をですね伺えることができるかと思います。続きましてオスマン先生ですけれどもオスマン先生は現在エジプトのですねメノフィア大学文学部哲学科の教授でありまたそこのですね学科長を務めておられます。メノフィアというのはですね都市の名前なんですけどもカイロから南に1時間ほどですね行ったところにある町だというふうに聞いています。私自身は一度も行ったことないんですけどもそのですねメノフィアにある大学でですね教鞭を取られています。でこのオスマン先生はですね主に論理学であるとかですね数学科学哲学科学論ですねこういったことに非常に強いご関心を示されてそれをですねイスラム思想の文脈の中で考えてこられました。本日はそのイスラムのですね伝統の中で科学哲学をどう考えることができるのかということをですねお話伺えると思います。でお二人から
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين المبعوث رحمة للعالمين محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. First of all, I would like to thank the CISMOR staff for inviting me and giving me the chance to participate in this symposium and offer special thanks to Prof. Dr. Katsahiro Kohara and Prof. Dr. Samir Nuh for all of their hard works in CISMOR activities. I also would like to say greeting to all attendees. It is a pleasure and a privilege to stand before you all. The title of my paper is Islam and Science, from the creativity and attractiveness of the past to the variables of the present. Let us begin. One cannot deny or ignore the huge contributions made by the Arabs and Muslims in the area of science and philosophy during the golden era of the Islamic civilization. This era attests to the capacity of the Arabs and Muslims to challenge the impediments of progress and to overcome the difficulties that prevented them from mobilizing their creative energies in various fields, not only enabling them to accommodate to the cultural environment left behind by the retreating Greco-Roman civilization, but also to develop an intellectual and technical world of genuine Islamic character, a world that complies with the religion, the language, and the spiritual and moral characteristics that define what could be called the distinctive Islamic identity. The aim of this paper is not to praise the achievements of Muslims in science and philosophy. This has been the aim of many writers since the sunset of the Arab Islamic civilization. Nor does this paper aim at mourning the collapse of the Arab Islamic civilization. The paper primarily aims at taking an objective look at the factors that have led to the launching of the Arab Islamic culture project in the Middle Ages, as well as at identifying the local elements of originality with regard to what was produced by the Arab Muslim mind in science and philosophy. In other words, I will try to determine the exact position of the Arab Islamic civilization in the course of the development of the human civilization in general. The results of my efforts will be used in order to answer a pivotal question, namely if it is possible in the light of the current locality to launch a contemporary Islamic civilizational project which can be comparable to the great project of our ancestors. All history is contemporary history. With this statement, the Italian philosopher Benedetto Croce has hit a strict delimitation between the study of nature and the study of human events in the world. The former is a science that seeks to formulate concepts of nature objects and to discover the laws governing them. The latter is a science that seeks to identify the significance and the way of the historic occurrence of ideas. The results of the study of nature remain mere neutral propositions, mere neutral propositions that we can strip from the spatio-temporal frameworks in which they have been formulated. The results of the science of history, however, are governed by the local spatio-temporal context of the events themselves on the one hand, and by the local temporal and spatial context of the historian on the other. In other words, a historian indeed resurrects the past by infusing life into it, and gives to it something from his own experiences, which take a certain point of vantage with respect to the events that he examines, and which become a part of a problematic situation that depends on the existing state of knowledge at a given time and place. Indeed, all historians have to refer to the same event and to agree about the truth of propositions regarding this event, but their view to the event, then their historiography of it, will always change as a function of their changing position in time and space.
実際、すべての歴史家が一つの同じ事象、出来事について言及をし、そしてその事象に関わる命題の真理は何かということについて合意をして、それであってもその事象をどう見るかという視点というのは様々でありますし、またその歴史家がどういった研究方法をとって修士を行うのかということも、時間空間の影響によって立場が変わる、それによって変化するものであります。
The absence of the term, for example, may mean the absence of its meaning. This is a serious error made by some historians of Islamic civilization in the West. If the historian did not find the word conscience in the language of the Arab Islamic civilization, he thinks that the Muslims did not know the idea of conscience. We can thus reformulate Croce's thesis to all history is local history, because it reflects different views. Then it is certainly difficult to achieve strict neutrality in all our history, in particular the history of science, unless we put aside our current locality, including the different perspectives, as well as the questions that we pose from our vantage point, and the terms in which these questions are formed. Only through that method, we can understand the speciality of the Arab Islamic civilization and its culture requisites, as well as its originality and distinctive position in the general civilizational context. Let us then put a definition of science according to the local spatio-temporal context of the Arab Islamic civilization. The term Arabic or Islamic science denotes the scientific activities of individuals who lived in a region that roughly extend chronologically from the 8th century Anno Domini to the beginning of the modern era, and geographically from the Iberian Peninsula and North Africa to the Indus Valley, and from southern Arabia to the Caspian Sea. That is the region covered for the most of the period by what we call Islamic civilization, and in which the results of the activities referred to were for the most part expressed in the Arabic language. There is no doubt that the circles of Arabism does not correspond to the circle of Islam. Among the Arabs, there were Jews, Christians, Sapiens, and Magi, or who we call fire worshippers. Similarly, among the Muslims, there were Turks, Persians, and others from the non-Arabic races. Nevertheless, I believe that there is overlap between the circles, Arabism and Islam, because as the Latin language was the language of science in Europe in the medieval ages, the Arabic language was the language of science in the whole of Islamic world. It is then an Arabic civilization because the books left behind are written in Arabic language, even though Persians, Assyrians, Jews, or Greeks wrote most of these books. It is also an Islamic one because those who wrote these books lived in the home of Islam, whether they converted to Islam or remained on their original religions. This about the spatio-temporal framework of Islamic Arabic science. As for its content, it covers the mathematical sciences, which primarily comprise the arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and musical theory, and their applications in fields such as optics and mechanics. Algebra was added to this group as a branch of practical arithmetic or the science of calculation. This group, this is apart from the nature experimental sciences in their different types, such as medicine and alchemy and others. In the same spatio-temporal frameworks, the philosophy emerges as a cognitive mental activity practiced by Arabs and Muslims starting from incoming Greek legacies. Also, this legacy has taken from the beginning a local character regarding its contents, visions, questions, and issues that concern the Muslims primarily. Needless to say that the relationship was close between science and philosophy, and that the Islamic religion was a crucible in which they mixed, a crucible that granted from the motivation with huge responses in all parts of the Arab Islamic world. In this point, we must say that science and philosophy were secular activities that were practiced, developed, and propagated as rational inquiries, completely independent of any religious authority, which of course did not prevent the propensities of these autonomous, self-legitimizing mode of thinking from offering their own rationalistic interpretations of religious doctrines, such as revelation, prophecy, or providence of religious institutions such as law. Summing up, one can say that the Arab Islamic Renaissance in its apogee was always driven forward and supported by the auspices of religious authority, unlike the Western European Renaissance, which fought for a long time against the domination of church and clergy. The historian Richard Southern described the process of acquisition and adaptation of Greek science and philosophy by Arabs and Muslims as the most astonishing event in the history of thought. The event is astonishing because it strikes us as unaccepted. Indeed, Greeks learned from ancient Egyptians and Babylonians, Roman from Greeks. But when the Greek-Roman culture was transferred to the Arab Islamic world, there were many religious doctrines that seemed at the first glance opposite to the incoming thought. It was unaccepted that the Arab philosopher could harmonize that thought and the tenets of Islam. However, the best way to explain the unaccepted in history is to try to understand it, not as seen from outside, but by passing through its inside and realizing the significance of the choices made by the event makers responding to their situation as they perceived and experienced it. However, most historians of the Arab Islamic Renaissance look at it from one of two perspectives. Either we find an interest in Arabic scientific texts solely for the purpose of recovering lost Greek works or reconstructing obscure episodes in the Greek thoughts. Alternatively, the attention is focused on the different effects of these Arabic texts on the development of the modern European thought. In fact, both perspectives ignore the Renaissance as a genuine phenomenon of the Arab Islamic civilization itself. This civilization has often been regarded as a negative gateway to the ideas of other, or as a lackluster link which connects through the movement of translation an old and a modern Western creative thinking, which is not valid in any way. Excuse me, the translation from English to Japanese take more time than the English. So I'll move to page 5. Okay. In his analysis of the glaring appearance of the challenge that faced Europe by the Arab Islamic civilization in the medieval period, followed by a series of crusade invasions to the Muslim East, evolved into a full colonization of large parts of it, Arnold Toynbee described the Arab Islamic reaction having only two forms. The first is the uprising of zealotism and isolationism, a refuge in which the defeated seek consolation in the achievements of the past. This form of reaction was reflected in the Salafi trend, which has taken religious radicalism as a shield against intruders. The second is the appearance of Herodianism, or rather its pseudomorphism in its feature of Western civilization as the means of overrating the threat. This attitude has been manifested in the secular trends, the adherents of which discarded their religious identity and the culture inheritance in the hope of catching up with the march of progress. Toynbee holds that both reaction as failures. The first did not have any creative energies emanating from a genuine spirit. It is nothing more than a deposit of fossilized civilization energy. As for the second, it may be successful, but its success is external because it does not provide a creative contribution to the trend of civilization. It is a process of imitation, not a process of creativity. In other words, we can say that if the first trend, the zealotism, is the Islamic one, it is not contemporary, because it throws itself in the bosom of the past in order to not to face the nightmare of reality. It is very similar to the ostrich when it buries its head in the sand to escape from the hunter. On the other hand, if the second trend, the Herodianism, is contemporary, it is not Islamic, because it throws itself in the bosom of the West in order to flatter the vector, the Western civilization, but it takes from it only the external appearances. It truly benefits from the scientific achievements of the Western civilization, but that does not provoke in the mind new creative energies. If we look at the Arab Islamic world in the light of its current locality, we shall find that Toynbee's argument still applies largely, although it has taken new dimensions that have turned to be more dangerous. The trend of Herodianism is expanded throughout the Arab Islamic world. As for the trend of zealotism, it is and was diminished internally and externally, politically and economically, and in its mature form, it becomes, as it is described now, the criminal terrorism that aims at undermining the foundation of civilization.
Again?
I would like to complete the summary of paper, but time is over. So, I would like in the end to say that the Arab Islamic world possesses the material and the human wealth that will enable us to achieve that, the aim of this paper, i.e., namely an international huge project for new civilization. It has a culture, institutions that can be the starting point of many projects, but we can fulfill some conditions before that, including informational and educational and economic and political reforms which stem from ourselves before external local perspectives impose them on us. Thank you for your attention, and once again, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this event. I am very happy to visit Japan, and I am very happy to see you today. Thank you.